Oh, you know what?
Okay.
It's not going to alert us when you start the recording, so just let me know when you're good.
It's recording. Go ahead.
Awesome. All
Yep.
right. Well, I
Thanks.
want to welcome everybody to the seventh free online space education summit. I've been producing this in partnership with Ron and Gitika for quite a while now, and it's awesome to have all of you here. And welcome to those of you that are joining us by the recording later as well. We're really focused on preparing for humanity's future in space. We do this very much from the perspective of the overview effect, which I'll share more about in a moment. We're thrilled to have a panel of flown astronauts, all commercial astronauts this time, with us this morning. We've got breakout sessions all day, and then Gitika and Frank White will be our closing session this evening. So hope you guys will come back for that as well. For context, I always like to turn to the headlines because it's kind of amazing that we live in a time where commercial space companies are making science fiction into reality on a regular basis. This is not this week, but I thought the image of a couple of Falcon 9s self-landing at the same time is always kind of a powerful reminder. It looks like science fiction every time it happens. But space is hard. Just this week, we saw another test flight of SpaceX's Starship be lost, but they are embodying that element of moonshot thinking that says tackle a big problem, fail forward, fail fast. And I'm sure they'll be landing dual starships before we know it and catching the boosters, right? At the same time, it's amazing that we have yet another Blue Origin flight tomorrow. We'll get the NS-32 crew up, and we're going to have a few more people to interview, including a couple of folks in education roles. So I'm really excited about that. Um, and meanwhile, of course, Virgin Galactic is developing the Delta spacecraft and preparing for a much higher volume of passengers next year. So I do, for those of you that don't know Frank, who we said hi to just a moment ago, and don't know the overview effect, I think it's important to this discussion to share that right up front. And the overview effect was coined by Frank in his book of the same title in 1987, and it describes a cognitive shift that tends to occur when people travel to space and look back at the Earth. And they don't see borders, they don't see tribes, they don't see our conflicts down here. And they do see that we're all in this together. On this sort of fragile ball of life in an otherwise forbidding black void. And they tend to come back to Earth with a change in perspective. They tend to be say, more interested in protecting the planet and the environment, and more interested in diplomacy. So everybody's experience of it is different. And we'll hear from a few folks who have been to space and been able to look down on the planet in spectacular fashion. But wanted to at least share that term right up front because we'll be talking about it throughout the day. I also want to, I mentioned them, but I want to acknowledge my co-organizers of the event. It's been fantastic to do all seven of these with Ron Rosano from the very beginning. And in fact, this came out of an event that Frank White hosts called the Overview Roundtable. And Ron and I were together on a education task force. I think when we were first talking about this idea, so it's fantastic to see it into fruition in such a long-running event. And Gitika Gorthi joined us, probably a year or two in, and has been involved for a number of these now, maybe four, Gitika, if I've got that right off the top of my head.
Yeah, I think this is my fourth one.
Yeah, awesome. So Gitika is currently a student at Columbia University. She's a founder of Ignited Thinkers, and she is responsible for the space careers strand and a lot of our outreach to young professionals. And Ron, by the way, when I met Ron was a Virgin Galactic future astronaut, but Ron flew now, boy, a year and a half ago. Ron, is that right? In
Yeah,
October?
about 18 months. Yeah,
Wow.
October 2023. Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. So we really have a four astronaut panel. We've got two folks who have flown on Blue Origin and two folks who have flown with Virgin. I'll introduce the panelists in just a moment, but first, let's talk all of you. We're thrilled to have you here. It was fantastic to hear some of your stories in the chat and out loud as we waited for the event to get started. Definitely, still encourage everybody share in the chat where you're from. We had a fun welcome question. Share where you want to go in the solar system or beyond. And some people have a favorite exoplanet. And definitely be thinking about what you might want to ask the panelists here in just a few minutes. So, if you need help or you have a question, definitely fire away in the text chat. We'll be keeping an eye on that. You can use the raised hand feature that will at least alert Ron. And if it's appropriate, you can unmute and share screen. This is a small enough group that I don't think we'll have any crowd control issues. But of course, you do want to keep your mics muted and be respectful of everybody else that's here and the recording. If you do use the help feature, that will also send Ron a message. Ron is our host on Zoom, although we'll have a number of co-hosts throughout the day, but he should be able to help you out there. Obviously, you can reach out to Gitika or I too, and we will help you out if we can. That being said, before I introduce the panel, any questions or urgent needs, now's a great time to speak up or share them in the chat, and we'll try to help. Without too much wait time, though, I will jump right ahead. So we are really thrilled about this morning's panel. It's going to be such a great addition to the body of astronaut interviews that we've been able to collect through these events. So I will very briefly introduce our panelists, and then actually I'll kick things off by giving each of you a chance to share your trajectory. What brought all of you to the point where you've been to space and back, and what brings you to a space education event in 2025. But briefly, Kerianne Flynn just flew last month, if I've got that right, on the NS-31 all-female crew with Blue Origin. She comes from a career in fashion and human resources. She's devoted a lot of time to board service and nonprofits. And film production, so perhaps we'll hear some of the overlap there with the films that she's done. And she is in the right place this morning, I like to think, because she aims to inspire the next generation of dreamers like her own son. And we are joined with Kerianne. Dave Mackay is a veteran pilot and test pilot with the Royal Air Force, with Virgin Atlantic for years before moving to Virgin Galactic and being the test pilot on their initial spacecraft. In fact, he flew a number of test flights into space and is a commercial astronaut and flew Richard Branson's flight, the Unity 22 flight. So we're really thrilled to have Dave Mackay with us. And I imagine as a test pilot, he's going to have a different perspective and somebody who's done this a number of times than some of the others might. And then finally, we are joined by Dr. Eiman Jahangir, and he is a physician, a cardiologist, an analog astronaut before he went to space. He flew with NS-26 on Blue Origin just last year as well. All of them are relatively recent flown astronauts. The Moon Dow sent him up, so we might get to hear a little bit of that story. And speaking of firsts, we had some firsts come up in our discussion earlier, but Dave is the first Scottish person to go to space, and Iman the first Iranian. So we're excited to have all of them here and excited to hear their perspectives. So thank you, all three of you, for joining us. I'm going to kick it over to you guys and our initial question, and then Ron's got one and Gitika's got one before we open it up to everyone. But our initial question is, what is the trajectory that brought you here? And if you want to sort of extend the metaphor a little bit, we like to talk about who gave you that gravity assist along the way, if there was a teacher or mentor or key interaction you had along the way. And we'll be a little more open-ended about who answers the other questions in the future. But if we can just kind of go across the slide right here, Kerianne, maybe I can put you on the spot to kick us off.
Sure, I'd love to. I just want to thank you, Mark, and Gitika and Ron for inviting me to be on this panel. I'm honored to share my story and, spread the word about civilian space travel and also, the overview effect. Hi, Frank. I know we are scheduled to talk soon. So, what brought me here? I've always had a fascination with the stars, and like looking up at the stars, I felt like, we're all kind of connected. We all look up at the same sky. We all look up at the same constellations, and I felt a little bit of connectedness to humanity when I looked up to the stars, and I've always wondered what was out there, that childhood curiosity. But I went through my life, my career, not really seeing a path for me in the space industry. I grew up in a time where it was dominated mostly by males, and so I didn't really see myself in those shoes. And then actually, what sparked a renewed interest in actually traveling to space were the companies that were exploring commercial space travel. And I have been signed up with Virgin Galactic since 2012. And I have a number, and it's early enough that I hope to go in the next few years, but it has been quite a journey of waiting. And during that time, I've met many, many wonderful people, future astronauts and individuals in the space industry, and it's just kind of even increased my love and my interest in space. I've been eclipse chasing actually with Ron, and it's just been a wonderful community to be a part of. And I expressed an interest when Virgin Galactic retired their current fleet. They're building two great new spaceships, Delta. But when they retired them, I just saw I saw my dream pushed a couple years forward. And so I expressed an interest in flying with Blue Origin by clicking the button that says fly to space on their website. And I filled out a form. Someone called me, and we just had further conversations. And they asked if I would be willing to be a part of an all-female crew, which I said, of course I would. I make movies about women's empowerment, and it just seemed like the perfect match. So, and then, it all happened actually quite quickly. I was notified in February of my crew and my date. And, so I'm still kind of processing all the effects of having flown to space, but I'm really happy to be here.
Well, that really is quite quick. But processing the effects of it, I think, is a perfect segue to Ron's next question. But let's hear what brings the other panelists here today. What's the trajectory that brought you here? So let's go to Dave if you want to jump in, Dave.
Hey, thank you, Mark, and thank you everyone else. Great to be here. I love Kerianne's story there. Go online, click the button, fly to space, and there you go. If only it were that easy. My story is a little bit different. I was born and raised in the very north of Scotland, in an area that was actually used for low flying training by the military. And when I was 6 years old, I moved from the very north coast of Scotland, to a place on the east coast, which was a natural entry point for military low-flying aircraft. And so on a daily basis, almost on a daily basis, I would see military fast jets flying over my home village. Very low, very fast, very noisy, very exciting. And I thought, as a young boy, 6-year-old boy, I thought, I want to do that. That looks like fun. And then, of course, and we're talking the 1960s here. And then in 1964, I was awarded a prize for perfect attendance at Sunday school. And that prize was a book called Exploring Space, and had a picture, a drawing of a Mercury capsule with an astronaut inside, cutaway drawing with an astronaut inside. And that was my favorite bedtime reading for years. And actually, skipping forward a bit, I carried that book on my first space flight in my pocket, just because. And but later decade, we were watching live the Apollo Saturn program, and that was absolutely extraordinary to watch those massive rockets taking off in real time. Was just absolutely, literally mind-blowing at the time. And so I watched Apollo 8. In particular, I thought that was extraordinary. The first flight to go around the moon, and it was done at Christmas time, and that made it seem even more special. They read passages from the Bible. I'm not a religious person, but there is some very profound words there. And then, of course, Apollo 11. And sometime at that point in time, I found out that those astronauts were former military test pilots. So from a very early age, I had this very ambitious plan to become a military pilot, to become a test pilot, and then to become an astronaut. And actually, I met some people. I didn't tell many people about that because I thought, that's just way too ambitious, and people will laugh at me and say, "Don't be ridiculous." Can't you, have a more realistic ambition? But there were some people who I confided in and were very helpful, didn't laugh at me, and give me some advice. And anyway, it was a long journey. I joined the military. I became a pilot. Became a test pilot, and but I was living in the UK, and we didn't have a human spaceflight program. So really, I thought this is not going to happen for me. But there's a lesson for everybody: is never give up. Because I left the military. I joined Virgin Atlantic, and through Virgin Atlantic, got into Virgin Galactic right from the get-go, really. And so finally, my dreams came true much later in life. Wasn't quite as simple as Kerianne's story, but
Well, I love the gravity assist element of your story, that it was the camp prize that you had in the book that you got. And I hope that also stands out, especially to the folks who are running space education programs that are in the audience or watching the video, that those things have far-reaching consequences. There's lots of ripple effects into the future. You never know when you might inspire the next spacecraft test pilot. All right, Eiman, if you want to jump in and share your story next, we'd love to hear your trajectory that brought you here today, and perhaps any gravity assist you might have got on the way.
Well, thank you guys for inviting me here. I know some of the people here, and it's always good to meet new people. I have to make a correction. I was not the first Iranian in space.
Oh,
Anousheh Ansari of fame with the X Prize,
of
which
course.
helped assist with Virgin, and then Jasmine Mohbeli, who's a NASA astronaut, but first man from Iran. So I follow in the footsteps of the strong women that come down from our people, as they say. So just want to put that out there. I, much like most people here, probably have dreamt about space for a long time. I was fortunate to grow up in Nashville, Tennessee, and my family would take trips down to Huntsville to the Space and Rocket Center. So going back to education piece, and I would see these massive rockets and just be blown away that humans could do that. So from a young age, it's something much like most people I want to pursue. Fast forward, I realized really becoming an astronaut probably wasn't feasible. So I went down the doctor path, which seemed much more doable. I know people who are doctors. I didn't know people who were astronauts. And so graduated medical school and then was at Kennedy Space Center and realized, I still want to do this. Like, this wasn't just like a childhood dream. So started applying to NASA every chance I got, made it to the finals in 2009, made it to the finals in 2013 as an astronaut candidate, but didn't get picked up, and have applied for a total of 5 times with an application still in process, but they didn't interview me. So I don't think they're going to pick me up. And then in 2021, with the beginning of commercial space sending humans up there, I started looking for every other path possible. So I talked to Blue, I talked to Virgin, I looked at any sort of competitions that were out there, and eventually Moondao, which was a group that formed to try to crowdfund basically sending people to space, funded me. I ended up winning a seat in, I think I found out in April that I won the seat. And then I found out in June that I was flying in August. So maybe not as quick around turnaround time as Kerianne, but I liked it being quick because, I didn't want to wait around for 10 years like I know some people have been unfortunately doing in the past. And so, yeah, so I went to space. It was awesome. And then afterwards, the experience was so impactful that I was able to apply for and become a crew member 7, which is working with Blue Origin to train astronauts and then also help with mission ops. So currently down in Texas, uh, ready for the flight tomorrow, helping out.
That's awesome. Thanks for making the time today to join us.
Happy to be here.
All right. Ron has got our next question, so let me hand it over to him.
Great, thanks, and good to see everybody. Um, you know, we've the idea of the overview effect is a great inspiration, and for me, the spaceflight experience was transformational, and I've thought too that, well, you can't really sit down and say, okay, I'm going to have the overview effect right now and like have it come to you. I always felt like, oh, it may come to you, it may not. So, you know, Kerianne and Dave and Eiman, do you feel like you've experienced the overview effect in some way? And was there something about the spaceflight experience that surprised you or that you didn't expect? And Kerianne, you
Oh,
want to
yeah, sure.
kick off?
Sure.
Sure.
I'll jump in. Thanks for the question.
Okay.
So I wasn't sure what the overview effect was going to be specifically for me. I've heard other people tell their stories, and they were inspired to take care of the earth or be an activist for peace. And I wasn't sure what category I was going to land, and I just left myself really open to the experience. And the one thing that I can describe is while I was in space, floating in zero gravity, looking out my window with my own kind of personal experience, it struck me that everything that I loved, everything I had ever seen, touched, visited, tasted, was down on that small planet that was just so bright in this vast blackness. And I was no longer on that earth. And that struck me emotionally. But I also believe that that those sorts of feelings have led me to a new perspective now that I have my feet back on the ground. One of the first things I did when I came back to my home is I dug my feet into the sand and got as close to the center of the earth as I could. And it's just a real feeling of awe, being on this earth and being able to envision, ourselves floating around on this little spaceship in the vastness of space. So, like I said, I'm still processing a lot of that. And, there are days where I'll walk outside and I just look up at the sky and I'm in awe of humanity and this planet. But it's a little difficult to put into words. I have to work on my story, I guess. But it was overwhelming and beautiful.
Yeah, for sure. I felt the same thing. I didn't think I'd ever be able to express the full extent of the feelings with words. And also for me, the experience was, I mean, the spaceflight experience was just a spark of thinking that came after. And Dave, I always thank you for your thoughts about that you gave early on. Said, well, a lot of people are focused on the weightless part, but don't forget about the rocket ride. And that is a spectacular thing. Uh, Dave, were you looking for overview effect? I mean, I'm sure your 3 flights into space affected you in some way. How are you
Um,
thinking about them now?
yeah, so it's interesting because, obviously I'd heard about the overview effect, but to be honest, I hadn't paid a lot of attention to it. Um, and that was really because, we were doing test line, we were gradually expanding the envelope. But there's, a couple of things I'll mention. On those early flights, we were doing short duration rocket burns, so maybe 20 seconds or something. And on those initial ones, maybe getting up to 60,000 feet, 70,000 feet, and gradually building up. But I do recall flying from Mojave over the Mojave Desert And we had a flight which got up to just under 100,000 feet. And I recall briefly glancing outside. Most of the time, we're focused inside. We're gathering data. We're looking at how the vehicle's performing, how the systems are performing. We're flying it. But I do recall glancing outside and looking at the atmosphere, and it almost felt like we were, even at that altitude, about 100,000 feet, it felt like we were already at the top of the atmosphere. There was hardly anything else there, wispy little clouds or whatever parts of the atmosphere. So that was the first strange impression I got. That surprised me. And the other surprise I had was how bright the ground seemed. And it was almost as if, flying out of Mojave, which is desert, but it was almost as if we'd been transported to being over a bright sandy beach. I was standing on a bright sandy beach. It was that kind of brightness. And that really surprised me. And so anyway, we continue with the test flight, and eventually, I do a full duration burn with Mike Masucci and Beth Moses, and we end up in space. And before that flight, we as test pilots, we go for a set of cards. We have a set of test points that we're going to target and try and achieve. And both Mike Masucci and myself had said to each other, people are going to ask us, what's it like up there? So we've got to put in a test point, look out the window. Sounds crazy, but that's the kind of mentality we have. And so we practice that in the simulator as well, so that we get it right. And typically in the simulator, which is a pretty good visual system, I would look out left and I would see Los Angeles. So I would see Las Vegas. And Mike Masucci would look out to the right and he'd see Los Angeles. And we'd do that. We practiced it. When the actual flight came to that test point, I looked out and I could see so much of the planet that I couldn't find Las Vegas. It was incredible. The view shocked me. And it was also early in the year. It was February 2019. And there was a lot of snow on the ground. And the snow was sparkling. And it was just an amazing sight. And so I have this image imprinted in my mind of this scene of here we are, we're weightless. The vehicle is really, really steady. It's not moving. So there's no noise. Everything's shut down. There's no fans or anything. So if you can imagine those things, you're weightless, no movement, no noise. Those three things all together on their own are extraordinary. But now you're looking outside this incredible view. The Earth is incredibly bright, sparkling. If you look straight down, it's like there's no atmosphere there. It's completely translucent. And looking horizontally out, you can see this very, very thin band of the atmosphere, shockingly thin. And you look at that and you think, wow, that's what's keeping everything on planet Earth alive. And it's beautiful, beautiful colors, multiple layers within that shallow band of the atmosphere. And then outside that, beyond, is this incredible darkness of space, the blackest black I've ever seen, a dense matte black. And then you can see so much of the curvature of the Earth. You get a sense of its scale. And for me, the Earth looked small. It looked vulnerable because of the atmosphere, and it looked absolutely stunningly beautiful. And I was left with the impression that we are so far away from anywhere else in the solar system that there's no practical plan B right now. Now, maybe we'll go to Mars pretty soon, but Earth is very, very special, very vulnerable. And so I came back really after that flight, and it does take a time to process. I fully appreciate what Kerianne was saying earlier on. It takes a long time to fully process it. And it helps to talk to other people that have done it, especially the people that were on your flight, I think, to share those feelings and emotions. But I came back feeling that, hey, we've got to look after this planet much better than we do right now. And why the heck are we all fighting with each other? We're on a very small spaceship that we're all sharing together, and we got to look after it.
Excellent. Yeah, that's I felt a lot of those exact same feelings. Eiman?
I mean, that was beautifully said. I don't know if I can top that. And I love that you had the experience as a test pilot, because when you're doing mission ops, it's very easy to not take your eye off whatever you have to do, because you're not only in charge of your own safety, but the people that you're carrying up there with you. So that was great. So thank you for sharing that. I think, all of the things that Kerianne and David said, I would agree with, darkness of space, the thinness of the line. It was shocking how quickly we can leave this planet, right? Like a Blue Origin flight, New Shepard, maybe 12 minutes round trip, 13 minutes, and you are in space in like 2.5 minutes. I mean, I can't walk down the street in my neighborhood in 2.5 minutes, right? So that ability for us to leave the comfort and the safety that is this planet is always a little bit mind-blowing to me, because you do look up and it looks endless, right? When we look at the stars, when we look through the clouds, I mean, the clouds can appear quite high. But with the technology that we have, it's not endless. It's pretty rapid to go up there. And I do think eventually we'll get to Mars and these planets, but we need similar technology that makes it quick, because no one really is going to be too eager to go out there if you're spending 3 years round trip with all of the exposure to radiation, things like that. So my hope is the technology continues to improve, and like some of the ideas that Virgin had in the past, where you could pop off maybe in Arizona or wherever, New Mexico, and end up in China, in much shorter time. That would be amazing. And I don't know why, as the technology improves, we won't be able to do that. And then everyone will get exposure to this idea of the overview effect. I also loved what you said, David, about the 100,000 feet thing, because there are a few companies that are trying to make this experience more accessible. Space Perspective, unfortunately folded. There's also Worldview that right now I think is focused more on research, but the plan is eventually to have human flights. And the fact, I mean, I saw 100,000 feet come and go, so I didn't have a lot of time to like experience what that was. But it would be great, from what you're saying, that there is really, like, you do get this feeling that you're at the cusp of the atmosphere. And I think that if one of these companies actually is able to start sending humans at a reasonable rate, and we can send 8 to 10 people up at a time, that would be pretty incredible, because that would expand this experience for others.
Super, thanks. It is a remarkable existence that we have here, and I think we just don't get a sense of it from being on the ground.
Yeah, and I have the last question for all of you. I want to start off by saying I was really inspired by all of your stories. So I kind of came up with another question. So I might ask you two in one, especially with what Dave was saying about many times, even as a student, it can be intimidating to say, oh, I want to be an astronaut when I grow up, because many times people look at you like that's still unrealistic and it can look like a child's dream. So now that it's starting to become more of a reality, I think it's amazing to see all of your stories and how you made it a reality. So my question for all of you, or two questions, is how might we best prepare students for the growing space economy? And if you could go back in time and give your younger self a piece of advice, what would that advice be? And it could be related to your journey to space or career advice, life advice, anything. So just to repeat, how might we best prepare students for the growing space economy? And if you could go back in time and give yourself a piece of advice, what would it be?
I'll start again. Thanks for your question, Gitika, because I do think that, as much of a wonderful adventure as it's been for these adults to go up into space and experience it, fewer than 1,000 people have been to space, and fewer commercial astronauts have flown to space. How do we translate this into the betterment of humanity? And I get that question a lot, and I understand it. And I believe that everyone in this industry has a passion for that. We want to bring up the next generation to be interested in space, to feel like their dreams can be fulfilled, to pursue a career in space, even if they don't see themselves in space or people like them in space, or feel like there's a path for them. And so, part of my philanthropic work is in education. And I think we start young, and we encourage children to develop an interest in science, not only science and STEM and those buzzwords, but in space in particular. And so, I would like to see it incorporated into the curriculum a little bit more. I think we have a lot to share, and not just, these Apollo missions went to the moon and now there's commercial. And I feel like there's an opportunity to really educate this younger population and get them interested, in that. What that is, I don't know yet, but I'm very interested in helping to make that happen. And as for the second question, if I went back to tell my younger self something, I would tell her to pursue a career in space research and or pursuing being an astronaut, because it's so beautiful that I got to have this experience, and that it's becoming more accessible to everyone, hopefully. I feel like I missed my calling a little bit. And I really wish I could have been part of this, this entire shift for humanity to go out and explore space. And I wish I would have nudged that young, curious woman who was looking for a career path to pursue one in space.
I guess I can go next. Regarding inspiring people, I think I would let the students know. And I went to this big event in Edinburgh, Texas, which is an hour from Starbase. And that the whole purpose of that was they brought actually 6,000 students in from all over to try to motivate them to be interested in STEM. And it's because if you're interested in space, it doesn't have to be an astronaut. I mean, there are so many ways you can be involved in this industry, and every single career you could think of needs to be involved in this industry. So whatever your passion is, whether you want to be a welder, or you're an artist, or you're an engineer, or you're a physician, and you're interested in space, you can find a way to do that. So pursue the passion, but also looking for avenues that you can do it in space. My younger self, and whether or not this is practical advice for anyone else, so leave it or be it. But for me personally, I think the thing that limited me from getting picked up by NASA the first 2 times was that I wasn't a military veteran. And because if you look at the physicians they've picked in the last 5 rounds, they all were former veterans, which makes sense, right? If you have like 6 good candidates and you're only going to take one, you might as well take the one that had some operational experience in a system that you well understand. So maybe I would have gone into the military or in the reserves earlier on in my career. I remember in 2013, so I was like early 30s, I told my wife, hey, I want to join the reserves, the Coast Guard reserves. And she's like, I don't tell you no to many things, but that ship has sailed. You were not joining the military at this point. And I said, okay, well, that's fair. She still didn't oppose me getting on a rocket flying into space. So I think there is value if you're an American in this country to serving in the military, because I think it provides you a skill set unlike anything else. It can provide funding for schooling if your family doesn't have the means and if you don't have scholarship abilities. But also it provides you a skill set that I think becomes helpful in any of these industries, as David, can speak to probably more fully since he was involved in the military in his country.
Yeah, thanks, Eiman. Yeah, I agree. I guess I'm biased a little bit, but I think the military did me a lot of good. But I'll come back to that. I've talked to a lot of young people, lots of different age groups. What I do find is often the most interesting groups to speak to are very, very young, like 5, 6, 7 years old. They are all fascinated by space, and they want to know about aliens and UFOs and all sorts of things, and fantastic questions. They're great to talk to. And so it seems to me that at that sort of age, almost everybody is really, really excited about space. And then I think as people get older, a lot of it tails off. And I wonder why that is. I think maybe one of the reasons is a lot of people think that, they won't fit in, they can't be an astronaut, or they can't be an engineer, or that doesn't really interest them. But, as you were saying, it takes a whole village. It takes all sorts of people to launch a rocket, to organize and make an effective space company. So there are jobs there for everybody. It doesn't really matter what your specialization is. And so I think that's kind of a learning process. Space, as we all know here, I think is super important for so many reasons. And there's a huge industry out there that people can get involved in. So me personally, yeah, I mean, I think what the military did for me was it proved how much I can get out of a day, how much I can really do. Because, in training, they really push you hard. And I guess I was maybe a little bit lazy at a certain point in my life. And then the military showed me just how much I could really do if I was really pushed. And of course, that was very helpful. Advice to myself, I think I was pretty single-minded at a certain point in my life. I wanted to fly single-seat fighters because I wanted to do everything myself. I don't know. I'm not sure why that was, but I think maybe I was trying to prove something to myself. I don't know why. But I quickly discovered that, even flying a single seat fighter aircraft, you are part of a team. It takes a whole team of people to get that fighter aircraft up in the air. And, the teamwork side of things, I realized as I went on in my career is hugely important. And key to teamwork is communication. Often I've been asked, what should I study? Should I do physics, chemistry, engineering, whatever? And I say, any of those subjects are good. And there are many other subjects which are really good as well. But the most important thing is you have to be able to communicate with people you work with. If you can't communicate effectively, it doesn't matter how smart you are, how clever you are, you're on your own and people won't interact with you. So, good teamwork skills, trust, and respect for everyone else in your team are key skills, I think.
So, thanks, Dave. I'm going to relay a question from Logan. Thanks for raising your hand and sharing here. What you're talking about, different careers in space. Yeah, I think that's a great message for students that, yeah, you can be involved in the space industry in many ways. At some point, we're going to have space hotels. And if you have expertise in hospitality, you could be working on those space hotels, taking care of people that go to space. And another one is artists that design mission patches. There's videographers, photographers that work for space companies. And then, yeah, the space patches really, come from artists that work for the company. Did Dave or Eiman or Kerianne, did any of you have input on the patches on your mission patches? And so were there certain elements of the design that you wanted to see in them?
I did not have any input to the artistry, which is probably a good thing, actually. I'm not very good with art. So we had somebody who knew what they were doing when it came to designing our mission patches.
For our space mission, our patch was designed to kind of highlight all of the storyteller in each of the crew members. If you look at it, the background is it has a spaceship, and the background are 6 female silhouettes. They incorporated our silhouettes kind of abstractly into the background of the patch. And then next to each of our names, if you look in the stars, is a small symbol that represented kind of our storytelling and who we were and what was important to us. So Aisha Bo had a target star because of her ambition for setting big goals and her passion for STEM. And Amanda Wen had the scales of justice because of her activism in changing laws to promote civil rights. Gail King had a firework microphone for her work in journalism. I had a film reel for obviously my filmmaking and for sharing important narratives. And Lauren Sanchez's was a little image of her character in her book, Flynn the Fly, who has some learning. Oh, there it is. Has some learning challenges and ends up going to space. And so Yes, you can see that they're very small and they're worked into the stars, but they're right like next to each of our names.
Similar, I
Awesome,
mean,
thanks.
the Blue Origin mission patch has the input of the people who are going. They don't design the patch, but they give very clear input as to the things that are important to them. I think if you look at the mission patch for tomorrow, it's quite beautiful. The coloring, and then there's a large bird. The name evades me now, but is one of the birds of New Zealand. Because we have Mark Rocket, one of the first, I think the first person from New Zealand going up, also one of the seed funders for Rocket Lab, another space company. So it is pretty cool to see all of the patches come out and be designed, and they're all very unique and very telling of the people. For instance, this one has the caduceus because we have Gretchen Green, who's a physician going on the flight. I think she's the third physician to fly with Blue Origin to date, and I think the first woman physician on a commercial flight, which is pretty cool. And then Everest, because one of our astronauts, Jesse, has climbed Everest, and so what do you do after that? You go to space. So it's pretty cool to see how these all come together every time. It's one of my favorite parts of like watching these launches is like, what's the next patch gonna look like?
Hey, Ron, I wondered if you could talk about the Virgin Galactic patch. I mean, I think astronauts in the
Yeah.
back
Well,
inputs into that design, don't you?
yeah. I keep mine close by. Yeah, this is our Virgin Galactic 4 patch incorporating elements of the British Union Jack to recognize Trevor, a young girl and student representing Namira as a young girl looking at Polaris, and me and my work with students, the shape of the moon from the Pakistani flag, and also recognizing Trevor and my inspiration from Apollo, six other stars for one member of the crew. And I think before we finish, Mark, you have one more question you want to throw out?
Yeah, we got this is probably our last question. This comes from Drew, and he asks, "What surprised you most after returning from space, either in your reintegration, your relationships, or how the experience continues to influence your decisions?" And that's a I think it actually makes a great last question. But what has surprised you most since your flight in any way? Yeah.
Okay, well, I'll go first. I I think I'm more relaxed than I was before, and I think part of that is that I had a lifelong burning ambition to fly to space, and uh, and having done it, and having seen it, I scratched that itch, and it also meant so much to me too. It meant more than I expected. I had that ambition, but I learned and took away from the experience so much more than I expected. And so I'm more relaxed. I'm happier as a person, but and because I'm fulfilled, I guess, more fulfilled than I was before. I'm still really, really interested in airspace. I'm on a bunch of advisory boards, and I'm still very driven to do certain things in aerospace. Um, but I want to do it in a way which is more environmentally aware, and that's life in general. As I said earlier on, this planet is precious. We need to look after it. We need to be careful in everything we're doing. We need to be more sustainable, and we need to be more environmentally aware.
I think, oh, Carrie, you're mute. Kerianne, you're muted.
I mean, after years of being on Zoom, you'd think I'd get that right. Um, one of the things that surprised me the most when I first landed was how emotional I was. We were interviewed shortly after landing, and I could barely get a sentence out of my mouth. What I had experienced was so mind-blowing that my brain was still trying to catch up with it. And so it was a lot of emotion and several days of that emotion. It took me a while to really to ground myself. Much like Dave, I've been told that there's a serenity around me that people don't typically experience. I'm very energetic and a little chaotic sometimes, and I handle a lot of stuff at once. And I do feel kind of that sense of inner calm. And I'm not sure if it is because I've reached one of my dreams or it's because I just have a different perspective on, on this life, on this planet. And as far as my relationships, I believe I'm more loving and measured, and I'm very determined. I have a 16-year-old son, um, and who Ron knows. I've been signed up to go to space since he was 3 years old, and so he's been on this journey with me. But I work a lot harder, and it's not easy with a teenager, on our relationship, because it feels so important to me. And I'm so very grateful to my husband who has, supported these dreams. And I have so much more appreciation for a lot of the people in my life. I was lucky enough to have my some of my family come and witness my launch. I think my dad's on this call. Thanks, Dad, for coming and for your support. And I was allowed to have a few friends there, and it was like everyone held space for me on the ground. And so I have a huge appreciation for all the people in my life who have supported me and helped me through this. And I just, I want to pass that along to, whoever I can.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree. Someone told me I was finally the version of the person I imagined, like 24 years ago. I'd been trying to get to space since I was realistically probably about 23, 24, and I made it when I was 44. So yeah, 20 years, 21 years. One way or the other. I didn't know commercial space would be an option, so I was glad that it became an option. It really wasn't an option when I started this journey, unless you could afford to fly with the Russians. So yeah, I think there's something to be said for fulfilling something you've worked hard for a long time, whether it's going to space, starting a company, earning a degree, whatever it may be, being the first person in your family to graduate college, because there are people, definitely that's a huge achievement, right? Um, from another end, I always find it enjoyable to run into people who've had this experience, which still remains quite small when you look at like human population. As Kerianne had said, less than 1,000 people. I think less than 800 people have gone to space to date ever, and a number of those people are not alive anymore. Um, and orbital versus suborbital, I imagine there is some difference. I hope and I imagine all of us would love to go to orbital flight one day, and maybe in our lifetimes that will become more routine, more for commercial kind of experience. But it's just a cool thing, and it's there are images that are imprinted in your head, and I think I've found more. I went up to New York, and I'm not one for art museums, but I found myself going into the Modern Arts Museum, and I was like, I don't know, I just want to see something that was as pretty as what I saw in space, like something that was as impactful. And so I went looking for it, which was very atypical for me. Previously, I would never have walked into an art museum by myself unless I was with my wife and she was like, "We're going to an art museum." But now I'm finding beauty in things that I didn't see before. So I suspect there was some innate change that took place.
Well, that's kind of a neat note to end on there. Thank you for that thought. It has really just been awesome to hear from all three of you and from Ron, to your experiences, and thank you for sharing that with everybody who's here. And I'm seeing that we've got 50 students in Mexico City watching the stream right now. So some of the participants might be sharing with a classroom. And with everybody, of course, who will be able to watch these videos later. I'm so glad to be able to capture a little bit of your story and be able to share that with others, because there are ripple effects, and we don't know where that's going to lead, who the next test pilot might be in that classroom in Mexico, right? Um, So thank you all for sharing. I am going to share my screen again here. We've got just a couple of minutes before we go to the next session, and I've got a few resources to share with everyone. I know not everybody is staying for the next session, so hopefully you guys can see the slides there. Does that look good, Ron?
Yeah,
Cool.
that's good. And
Awesome.
yeah, thanks everyone for being here, and especially Kerianne and Dave and Eiman for joining us. Those are beautiful uh, words and such. That's a treasure of input. So thank you so much.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you indeed. Yeah.
It's been great as always.
Absolutely.
Yes,
Yeah.
thank you, all
Thanks,
three
you
of you,
guys.
for
Take care,
making the
guys.
time.
Watch the launch tomorrow, 8:30 a.m. It's gonna be awesome.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye.
A couple other things to send you guys away with. I of course have to at least mention my own book. I'll just a moment here, unless Ron beats me to it, I'll share the Amazon link in the chat. I also have a link for a free PDF because I know that might work better for many of you. But this is a collection of studies I did looking at how might we best prepare students for the growing space economy and humanity's future in space. That work actually led to a project I did with the Space Prize Foundation a couple of years ago. Space Prize was focused on empowering young women. We were doing that through spectacular contests, sending them on zero-G flights into Challenger centers and space camps. But the question became, what do you do for the girls that don't win? And it was we created a meaningful learning experience as well, and that's now released as an open education resource. So if you go to spaceeducation.org, it'll redirect you right there. It's an easy way to find it, and it's an ambitious curriculum that looks at not just an intro to space science or the history of space exploration, but also why space is important to people on Earth and what's happening in the growing space economy. And it gets into space philosophy issues like ethics and governance and sustainability. So invite you all to check that out. It's an open education resource that anybody can use. I built an online course for teachers that walks people through the book and the curriculum. So if you're interested, if you enjoy this day at the summit and you want to extend it over the next 12 weeks, we meet weekly on Zoom in a format similar to this, and we have discussion activities and simulations we run together, and lots of great content, giving us 12 more hours to dive into that. So it's just arieslearning.com/course. If you're interested in doing that. We've got a cohort. The summer cohort is starting next week, so you can get all fired up from this event and then just keep going next week, starting June 3rd. We do that after school in California time, so 4 p.m. Pacific Daylight Time. But I've got another one that I'm going to run in the middle of the night for folks in Australia and Asia. I've done European cohorts before, but there's one coming up for folks on the other side of the world. So we'll start that June 5th, which I think is 4 p.m. Sydney time is what we pegged it to, but it's like 11 p.m. for me. So you guys can find that at arieslearning.com /Australia. I'm also involved with a number of field experiences for educators and enthusiasts. We've got a brand new one coming up September 12 to 15. We're going to Lassen Volcanic National Park in California, which is a little bit like Yellowstone and Yosemite together, but with no people. So all four kinds of volcanoes in the solar system are represented there. They're geothermal elements similar to places like Io. We're going to be exploring the geology of it. We're taking a planetary scientist, astrogeologist with us. We'll be exploring astrobiology and the possibility of extremophiles on other planets in the solar system and beyond. And we'll have a dark sky experience with astronomer Pamela Gay. So we'll have Kirby Runyon and Pamela Gay from the Planetary Science Institute with us September 12 to 15. And again, if Ron doesn't beat me to it, I'll drop the link in the chat in just a minute. But at galacticmedallion.com, you can find the Lassen Volcanic Adventure. Our signature one, though, we take teachers out to Spaceport America for a full day tour of the Spaceport Authority and of Virgin Galactic's facilities there. We're going again in November. It's November 7 to 9. We expect they'll be in transition for the new Delta class ships, so we'll see some interesting stuff. And we'll be spending the next 2 days out in the desert with Dr. Kirby Runyon, touring the solar system without leaving New Mexico. So we get to lava flows and craters and sand dunes, places analogous to places on the moon or Mars or elsewhere in the solar system, and sunset at White Sands, which are directly analogous to gypsum sand dunes around the North Pole of Mars. That's an otherworldly experience, and I hope some of you will join me for that. I also want to mention I work with a company called SLU, and they provide students access to remote telescopes around the world and just authentic learning quests, they call them, that are opportunities for students to learn about whatever they're studying, but then collect their own data, write their own firsthand observations, and share it with a community of peers and experts, which may sound like exactly what scientists do. So this is a great opportunity for kids to access world-class, remote telescopes around the world. And they've just added the ability for kids to access Earth observation satellites as well, which opens up a whole wide variety of learning opportunities in Earth and space science. A lot of great connections there. So it's all standards aligned. It's subtly gamified, and I highly recommend it. So slooh.com, SLOOH.com, or you can reach out to me anytime. On the free side, definitely want to invite you guys to join the Space Educator Network on Facebook. Again, I'll drop that in the chat in a moment. Otherwise, you can just search for it on Facebook. I'm sure you guys will find it. A few hundred members there. Some of them are prolifically sharing resources. I try to share things there as well so that you guys are always up to date on opportunities like this. And feel free to share your own programs or opportunities there too. You will find there, among other things, our YouTube channel, which you can find at youtube.com/at Space Education Summit. This screenshot's a little dated, but we've got over 80 videos there now. Last I looked, we'll be putting up this session and several, if not all, of the sessions from today. If they come out well, will go up on there over time. So you can see lots of other astronaut interviews. You can see all of the closing sessions with Frank White, and just dozens of other sessions for space careers, young professionals, space education, and space philosophy from past events. So for the rest of this day, you're going to want to reference the schedule, same site where you registered. It's spaceeducation.squarespace.com. /schedule. You'll find all of the breakout sessions for the next 4 hours, and then the closing session with Frank White as well. Links through to descriptions and bios also of the astronauts we just spoke with today. And I will go ahead and put up the first session on the screen here, because in about 8 minutes at 9:15 Pacific time, we'll jump into the first round of sessions here, and Ron's going to open up the breakout rooms. What you will see is room 1, room 2, room 3, room 4. We do have more